I like to put my cash into long-term investments. So like cryptocurrency, the stock market, real estate. So while that is appreciating long-term, I'm using the business credit to invest into short-term investments.
All right, so Joe Average, he says, okay, I'm going to take 2 years and I'm going to follow Jack's plan to a T. And let's say when he started, he had like high sixes, maybe 680. That would seem like a Joe Average credit score. And so obviously there's probably some training or counseling you do around how to intelligently use cards and pay cards and bump your scores. And so he follows everything to a T, gives himself 2 years, opens the accounts, makes the relationships, applies the right way, times it all, blah, blah, blah. Realistically, 2 years, remember, this is a guy making 70 grand a year. After 2 years of doing what you're suggesting, realistically, how much no interest, admittedly, in a promotional window, it's no interest, capital could this guy realistically have access to?
I think in 2 years, $100,000 is extremely realistic. And my goal with my program is to help 1,000 entrepreneurs get access to $100,000 in credit limits. And I think no credit is not fixable. You know, if someone's under 700, there's something holding it back. Right. And everything is fixable. If you have late payments, you can get those removed. You have collections, get those removed. Everyone should be above a 700. And that's what I'm doing in the program, helping people get above that 720 mark and get access to the money. So yeah, it's
so
possible.
Anybody, and anybody always is within reason, you know.
100%. 2 years is so easy. A lot of people do it in a year. You know, if you have strong history with these banks and no business cards, you can do it in the first few months. It just really depends on what you have so far. And just know that no credit is not fixable. I had no access to outside money. And then I found business credit, and I had personal credit cards. And then I found out business credit cards were different and so much more powerful. And so the first reason why they're powerful is because they don't report to your personal credit. So to give you an example, if you get a $40,000 credit card, business credit card, you can turn that credit into cash, put that cash into an investment, max the card out, and that utilization won't affect your personal credit. So you can do this over and over and over and over again. And that's exactly what I'm doing with so many cards in my hands right now. I'm just getting these massive card limits, using this money in many different investments. And then, if you look at it in the standpoint of like, what's the safest way to invest when you have your own money versus the bank's money, it's so much safer to use the bank's money because one, it gives you more time to pay it back because it's 0% interest for 12 months. Then you can balance transfer multiple times.
Right.
So it gives you more time to pay it back, which is obviously valuable. Two, if you do run into like an oh crap scenario and you can't pay it back and it goes to collections, there are ways and laws that protect consumers against that kind of stuff. And there are ways to get that debt removed from your credit file. Obviously, that's the worst case scenario. But when you look at that scenario, it is so much better and so much safer than using your own money.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And this is like, it's funny, for me as, with Entre Institute, we have thousands of people coming in and they like want to learn to build a business, right? They want to become an entrepreneur. And, there's a few sort of psychological hurdles that people have to overcome to transition from, let's call it civilian life to entrepreneur life, right? Which is like extreme personal accountability, extreme ownership of results for better or for worse, and some very different attitudes around money, including very different attitudes around debt, right? That, really, really learning to love good debt. I mean, learning to love good debt the way you love, if you're a living organism, you love blood because it moves your oxygen. I mean, it's that level of love, right? And it's really hard for a lot of people. I mean, that's one of the biggest things we help people understand is I had to build an entire module in our training, reteaching people how to think about money because there's such strict, I would say, outdated attitudes in the modern world around debt.
Wow. Yeah.
And, and so tell me if I'm wrong, but you kind of landed on, you built a business, you sold a business, you built another business. I don't know, if you sold it or what, but you're kind of at this point now where you realize like your magical power is actually getting the capital and you're teaching other people how to do that. Is that right?
100%. I think it's like people just need to be shown how to access it. And I've cracked the code. I figured out how to become attractive to banks. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. And once you become attractive to banks, then it's just easy to get card approvals. Like I'm getting card approvals every week. I just got a 40K card approval 2 weeks ago. I got a $100,000 card approval this last week. I'm putting that $100,000 on my e-commerce store, and then just transferring all my other credit over to other investments, other businesses. It's amazing. And I think when you think about financing a business, there's really four ways, right? So you can finance your business with your own money, which, as I previously talked about, I don't think that's the best idea, in my opinion. The second way is to bring on an equity partner where you give someone equity and they bring the money, but then you're giving away equity, giving away possibly control.
Right.
The third way is through a business loan, and business loans are expensive, 10, 20% interest, very common. You're paying so much in interest, doesn't make sense. The fourth way, my favorite way, is just to finance your business through 0% interest business cards. And it's 0% for anyone that doesn't know, 0% interest for the introductory period. It might be 9 months, 12 months, even up to 20 months on some cards. And then even if you can't pay it back in that time frame, you then balance transfer to another card. So in this scenario, you're borrowing money for free, you're keeping all the equity, which can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah. So, okay. So you mentioned, I mean, it sounds like, well, I guess there's two things. One is the goal is not to get a bunch of credit so you can just live off of credit and then eventually run out of runway and default and have to get a job. Like,
yes.
So the credit is meant to be fuel that's being pumped into a vehicle that produces enough return to pay back the credit and to generate life sustaining income. And so for that, you got it. So you couple the business credit with an actual business. I'm curious, what do you are you looking for people that already have a business in mind, or are you also kind of steering them towards, all right, here's a business you can create coupled with the credit to pay for your life and give you the freedom?
I mean, there's so much opportunity. You can invest into your own business, or you can invest into other people's business. Like I just had a meeting today. This gentleman I met this last weekend, he drills oil wells in Texas, and the minimum to invest is $10,000 per oil well. And the expected returns is to make your money back in a 12-month period. So say, for example, I help someone get $40,000 in a business credit card. They use that credit, turn it into cash, which I teach people how to do, run through my processor, then use that cash to invest into this oil well company that cash flows thousands of dollars every single month. And now they have a cash flowing asset essentially that they've created with none of their own money, with money they borrow for free. Right. And so I have many examples like that, where you can just, create cash flowing assets like that with none of your own money.
So essentially it's arbitrage. You're saying, give me money over here at X% interest rate, which is 0 in many cases, and I'll deploy the money over here to generate either passively 12% or 22% or 6% or whatever through an oil well or a rental property or whatever, or it could be an active business and maybe it generates 100% return, whatever. And then you're just arbitraging it. And you're saying, okay, and then when the credit card comes due, you either pay it back with the returns, or as long as you've properly maintained your credit and kept the wheels turning, you've got another credit line you can roll the balance to and just keep kicking the can down the road. And I mean, so on the one hand, this sounds amazing. There's a part of me, and bear in mind, this is me almost just sort of devil's advocacy, because I see the world in pretty abundant terms and I take some risks that most people think are probably crazy. And, I guess so far I've gotten the last laugh, so that's cool. But to some people, at least, they would probably say, well, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. Like you're just building this house of cards. But I mean, you and I both know at the end of the day, it comes down to personal integrity. You either manage it responsibly or you don't. But how do you deal with that? How do you address that concern? And then how do you actually work with people, if you do, to not be idiots?
I mean, business is hard. There's risk in every business. But at the end of the day, it's like, do you want to use your own money or do you want to use someone else's money, which has less risk? So I think it really comes down to just analyzing the risk, meeting the good people that I was mentioning before, go to mastermind events, network, find these good people to partner with, and make your best judgment. But I think the only way to create financial independence is you have to put yourself out there. You have to risk things. You have to spend money to make money. And I think if people are not investing, if they're not putting themselves out there, they're not going to create success. They're not going to, some things you fail on. And honestly, a lot of things that I fail on, I embrace, because any failure makes me stronger for the next opportunity. So, don't look at failure as a bad thing, but, go with your best judgment, find the best people that you can find, make sure your contracts are good. And I really think the more money you have access to, the more money you can make. And one thing I will add, Jeff, is when you're using business credit to invest into these things, whether your business or these other investments, I like to put my cash into long-term investments. So like cryptocurrency, the stock market, real estate. So while that is appreciating long-term, I'm using the business credit to invest into short-term investments, right? Investments that are going to make a return in 12, maybe 24 months, because, why not? I can borrow money for free from the bank at 0% interest for 12 months while my cash is in long-term investment. So, while the short-term investment is moving forward, at least my cash is still appreciating in the market. So say like you have $10,000 that you could have put in, Bitcoin back in September, and you could have borrowed 10 grand to put into your investment. Now you have 20 grand working for you. That 10 grand investment in Bitcoin just turned to like, $60,000. And now this investment's probably going good as well. So it just diversifies your risk and gives you more opportunity to make more money.
Hey, sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to let you know you can get a free copy of my book, The Millionaire Shortcut, which shows you the fastest way to become a millionaire in the new economy. And there's a special link just for this episode in the description. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode.
And maybe you can kind of help illuminate what I'm talking about. Like, in our industry, we talk about this concept of like the digital nomad or the freelancer. You can kind of just come and go as they please. And as long as they have internet connection, seem to always figure it out. Like, is that you? Am I summing it up right?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I think, one, you need internet connection. Two, from my experience, you need access to the money. And then three, you need people to partner with. And so I think when you combine those three things together, that's what really gives you more freedom, right? So I've been traveling the world for the last about a year and a half now, lived in Bali for 3 months, Hawaii for a month, Mexico for about 4 months. And I just got a spot in Miami here this last week. And, that full-time travel kind of came to an end just because I wanted to kind of get more back on the routine. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'm right now.
So I like that. You kind of mentioned let's call them three legs of the stool. Like the stool won't stand without these three, right? And it's internet connection, which by extension means like a certain set of skills around how to leverage, the digital economy, right? So we'll call it internet connection / skills. And then it was capital. You got to have access to working capital or money. Yes. And then you talked about people to partner with, which was really like your network and, the right connections.
100%. So I think like specifically when it comes to the capital, like the best way, the easiest way that I've found it possible to get access to large amounts of money has been through business credit cards. And just about 13 months ago, I got my first business credit card. And before then, I only financed my businesses with my cash, never any credit. It was always my cash. And I always look at other entrepreneurs that were scaling so fast. I'm like, how the heck are they scaling so fast? Like, they must have a lot of money to get going. And then I found out, the power of business credit where you can borrow money for free from the banks and then use that money to, start scaling. And then when I started to go to mastermind events, that's when I'm able to, start meeting other investors, other people to partner up with. So kind of combining all of that, I think has really helped me get to where I am. And, just in the last 13 months, I was just approved for about $450,000 in business credit, going from 0 business credit cards to over $400,000. And so now I'm just on the journey of teaching other people on these same strategies.
So you are, if people are watching this on YouTube, they can see you're fairly young. I'm guessing what, like late 20s?
Yep. 27.
27. Okay. If you're listening on a podcast, you might not know that, but now you do. Jack's like under 30, now, I mean, do you come from a rich family or do you have a law degree I don't know about and you're actually a 6-figure guy, like any of that?
No lottery, not wealthy parents. I'd say, pretty middle class. My dad was an entrepreneur. He had a small software company. what I really admired about him, he really, like, he never scaled his company to the next level, but he created a good amount of freedom so he can go on trips with his family. That's what I really admired that about him. He worked on his own terms. It was just him. He sold software, same thing for the last 25 years, likes doing cool things, but he really worked so hard just so he could have that freedom with his family. Right. So that was at a young age, I really saw that. And I wanted to become an entrepreneur because I saw that work ethic and what he was able to do with his freedom. And that got me started in business at, I'd say, pretty young age. I was selling skateboards back in high school. In college, I had a video production company. And really, when I graduated school at University of Washington, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had a marketing degree, literally no idea what I wanted to do. Ended up getting a job at a social media company called Yik Yak. And then that contract ended. Same thing. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Maybe I had like $10,000 to my name. And, it was very hard to start a business with that little amount of money. And, I was fortunate enough to create companies that was able to, make some money and, allow me to pay the bills. But it wasn't, fast forward 4 to 5 years until I really, really had exponential growth. And I found that through business credit cards.
And so when you're talking about starting businesses, I know of two. You had an e-commerce business that I know you scaled to 7 figures pretty fast, like less than a year, if I read your bio right. And then you had a travel company that you sold. And this is all stuff you built completely virtually, completely online, right?
100%. Yeah, 100%. So I had a really big realization in the travel company, actually, so that my brother and we organized Cabo spring break trips for university students. Pretty fun business. It was definitely hard to put together, but the trips were fantastic.
Yeah.
And the first 2 years were extremely hard for us. Like it was hard for us to compete against these monster other companies. And right before the third year, we weren't leveraging credit, but we did leverage a large loan from someone that was very close to us. So we got this loan and it helped us get more hotel inventory. And that allowed us to scale very fast and take market share from our competitors. And basically after that third year, our competitor reached out to us to acquire our business. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of the big aha moment to me. It's like, okay, if we can borrow money, we can scale so much faster. And in this scenario, it led to an acquisition, either, build to sell or build to automate. In this scenario, we built and sold. But it really was like the big light bulb for me is like, okay, if we can borrow large amounts of money, we can move so much quicker.
Yeah. And it's actually interesting. You say that literally probably 30 minutes before this episode, before I hopped on to talk to you, I was on with our CFO and we're putting a deal package together right now, submitting to 3 different banks to get working capital, right? And like we're going, man. We're scaling. We've got a lot of money in, a lot of money out. It's not like we don't have cash, but frankly, you never really have enough. For us, the numbers don't matter, but as a guy that 3 years ago, I don't know, everything's relative. I'm sort of sitting here like, holy crap, man, it's amazing how much money it takes to scale a business and how much you can scale a business if you can get the money.
Exactly. And I always tell people this.
And it never ends, by the way. We're at a point where a lot of people might think, oh, they could back off. No, quite the contrary. We're doubling down because, Richard Branson actually said, I don't know if you read this quote. If not, you should add it to your marketing because it's perfect. He said, the number one responsibility of an entrepreneur is raising capital all the time, from friends, from family, from partners, from investors, even from your customers. Selling product is not selling product. Selling product is raising capital. And you should always be thinking that way as an entrepreneur. That's a Richard Branson. I think it was Richard
That's
Branson.
Huge. Yeah. That's huge. I always tell people the more you can borrow, the more you can make.
I couldn't agree more. Perfect example. I have, I own a fair amount of crypto, and at least seems like a lot for me. Some people probably laugh and go, that's nothing. But I for one, I staked a bunch of it. So I earned like 7% on assets that are growing anyways. And then I went ahead and maxed out the leverage you can get in Coinbase anyway. So I can borrow. I have a line of credit against my Bitcoin.
There we go.
And I don't have, and you're right, man. Here's I think the trap people have, or sort of the fallacy of people's thinking is they're like, well, what do I need the money for?
So I'm not going to, so they're like, well, I'm not going to go proactively get access to capital until I need the capital. But I mean, I'm sure your experience is the same as mine. By the time when you need capital, it's usually too late to secure capital. You should be working on getting access to capital when you don't have a pressing need for it. Because frankly, if you have a pressing need for it, whether it's a timeline or a sense of lost opportunity, that urgency is usually going to hurt you. You're going to end up paying more because banks and lenders, they can literally feel your desperation. You should be getting it when you don't need it.
Yes.
But then when you walk into that mastermind or that networking event, you know, it's like walking around with a letter of credit. You know that if the right deal happens, you can play. And you're not sitting there feeling like you're wasting people's time talking about hypotheticals of like, well, tell me what you got, and then I'll go see if I can get the money. Because that guy at every event, he's there, and nobody likes that guy.
100%, Jeff. You have to be prepared, and it takes a lot of time to get to that point. So I think even when people don't have, you know, things in mind like you're mentioning, it's so important that you take the actions and prepare yourself so when those opportunities come, you can take advantage. You know, just two guys I met from the mastermind event I went to over this weekend. One for the oil wells, I just met with him this morning, probably investing here tomorrow. Another guy manages a $10 million Forex fund, and the minimum's pretty high. But because I've taken the actions to prepare myself, I'm able to, invest in both opportunities. So, step one is get access to the funding, which, I'm a big advocate of doing that through business credit cards. And then, two, go to these mastermind events and meet people to invest with or to partner with. And so, a lot of people, it's sometimes very hard to think of business ideas, or find these good investment opportunities, but those are probably the same people that aren't putting themselves out there and going to these networking events. So, go meet people, go meet investors, get access to money. And I think things are going to be a lot easier.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're a globe-trotting Uber capitalist, credit leveraging digital nomad. Like, you live in this world where you go to events and you're interfacing with people. Like, you're constantly surrounded by opportunity, right? Like, you're not a person that walks around wondering, well, is there really opportunity out there? But, and I'm sure you appreciate this, same as me, that's not actually how most people are. Most people, they're going square down the middle of their lane. Their whole life, every day looks pretty similar. They talk to the same 23 people every week. Nothing new comes in. And they, in some ways, live in a sense, I would say, in a deprivation place that they're not even necessarily aware of, where it's like opportunity's hard to come by, or it's rare, or opportunity only knocks a couple times a lifetime. Like, no, man, you can go to any event in any major city on any day of the week, and there's going to be like 20 guys in a room somewhere who all have multi-million-dollar whatevers that they're needing partners or capital or something. And you just got to be putting yourself out there and finding those rooms. So how do you find those rooms? And B, what's your process for due diligence when you do, to make sure you don't end up putting borrowed money into a bad deal?
Yeah, I mean, great question, Jeff. So, I mean, to find those rooms, follow people on social media, whether it be YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook, that are doing things that you want to do. People that are living the lifestyle that you want to live. Follow those people and, take whatever courses or, free resources that they have and start, consuming the content that they put out. And oftentimes when they host events, go to these events. Don't be scared to pay money to get in the room. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on courses, on mentorships, on live events, just to meet people, right? And through paying, it's basically paying to play, right? You need to pay to get into these rooms. And when, everyone else is paying, it brings a certain demographic of people. So I think it's really important you make it to these events to meet people. And if you can make it to the events, at least, start following these influencers on social media and seeing what they're putting out, and start buying their courses, right? You need to start thinking like the people that you look up to, right? So find these people that have the life that you want, or doing the things that you want in life, and start trying to, replicate what they're doing.
I mean, it is so crazy how much opportunity there is out there. I mean, literally, and admittedly, people see my ads and I'm on social media. So it's like, they're like, oh, I should go hit that guy up. I get hit up multiple times a day no exaggeration, like 20 plus times a week with deals. And I don't have time to sift through them all, and I don't sniff them all out. And frankly, I'm usually doing my own stuff, but like probably half of them are good. I probably see 3,000 opportunities a year to make 12% or more safely on my money.
Yeah, it's everywhere. And I think one of the questions you asked that I actually forgot to answer was, how do you make sure you're putting your money in good hands?
Yeah, the due diligence.
Really, like when I invest, I'm not even specifically investing in the business model. I'm investing in the person, right? So for these two people that I'm investing in, like today and tomorrow, I'm investing in the people, right? I hung out with them all weekend. I went to dinners. I got coffee with them the next morning just to talk and, build a friendship. You want to build these relationships with people, and the more you trust them, the better they're going to take care of you. And so as long as the business model to me makes sense and checks out, and it really looks like a good way for me to multiply my money, that's fine, but I'm really investing in the person, so go meet people, go, invest to, buy people dinner, go get out there and network. And that combination with having access to money is really going to get you far.
And what are you really looking for? I mean, you're not, you don't have, although, I wouldn't say this would qualify you regardless, but I mean, it's not like you have an MBA. You didn't study you didn't become formally educated in business. You went out and got educated in business the real way, which is getting your ass kicked and figuring out the learning, right? So you kind of have an assumed knowledge base at this point, but maybe to the person who hasn't honed their instincts, what would you say a person should be looking for and filtering against in evaluating deals and or the people behind the deals?
Jeff, you have such great questions, man. I think when it comes to that, you really need to, try to spend as much time with that person as you can and look for, character traits that you really admire. Like that person being nice to other people, saying the right things, not going back on his word on anything. Really look for these really admirable character traits. And I think that's where I really find trust with.
Yeah, it's so funny. I mean, even I mentioned, we're applying to banks right now for, pretty big, these are bigger packages. These aren't like, we're not applying for credit cards. I mean, we're applying for like enterprise level strategic banking relationships. And what's crazy to me is how it's not that they don't care about the numbers, but I would say the numbers are about 25% of what they want to know. Like that's your cover charge to get in the door to the conversation is to put up some good financials and they go, oh, okay, that looks good. Come on in, let's talk. Everything else is about the story and the people. What story what is the story that our bank would be becoming a character in the story? And who is the protagonist or protagonists of that story? And who are the antagonists? In other words, what dragons are you slaying? What battles are you fighting? What problems are you solving? They want to know the stories. And I think for us as individual investors, we should take note from the banks. Banks are the best evaluators of risk in the world. And if they're primarily obsessed with, let's call them the soft qualities, the human qualities of the people that they're lending to, that's what we should be obsessed with. And yet so many of us, we get enamored with the deal. And we forget to study the deal maker.
Yeah, I know what you mean, man. And I think like when you really look at what banks are looking for in people to lend to, they're really looking for people they trust, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I help people build credit, I'm helping them become attractive to the banks. And there's a lot of things you have to do to win that trust.
Yeah.
One of the key things that people don't really realize is you should really have banking relationships with these banks before applying for the business credit cards. So even things like, going to the banks and opening up, business checking accounts, that's absolutely huge. Go open up a business checking account, put some money in the account and start seasoning that account. That's building the relationship with the bank. Just like, building a relationship with someone you just met over a meal, you have to season that relationship with the bank. And the longer you do this, the more favorable they're going to treat you.
So I'm curious. So like taking again, and I hate the term average because there's no such thing as the average person, because the average person is is an amalgamation of a bunch of different people anyways. But let's just assume we're talking to Joe Average, right? I don't know. Joe Average is maybe 42 years old. I'm 42, so I don't know why maybe that's not a random number, but 42 years old, has $12,000 in the bank, makes $70,000 a year, and just has a kid, and Joe Average, right? But it's not a sophisticated investor, financially and professionally. He's not a sophisticated person from a bank's perspective, right? What's a basic path that Joe Average can follow? How long does it take, and what result can he reasonably expect? And I'm going to qualify this by saying you have a course that I assume teaches this in much more detail, right? I mean, is that right? Your course essentially answers my question in a great amount of detail. So by no means am I expecting you to share every single nook and cranny of your course, but just at a general level, what can Joe Average actually pull off in what period of time, and what's he going to get out of it? And how roughly is he going to do it?
100%. Great question. I'll definitely try to be as precise and detailed as possible. That's a really good question. So before getting the business credit cards, there's a lot of things you have to do on the personal credit side. So you really want to have at least 4 primary accounts on the personal credit side, and also a banking relationship with the bank you want to apply for a business card at. So I always focus on the top tier banks first. This is like Chase Bank, US Bank, and Bank of America. And what you want to do is start doing your personal banking at Chase Bank, because they're the heaviest in relationships. And if you have a business, you want to open up a business checking account at these 3 top banks and start seasoning these accounts. And so even if you don't actually have a business, at least file an LLC. That's going to be a consulting business, right? Very broad, very generalized. But because you have this LLC, it's going to allow you to get business credit cards. And even if you don't have a lot of revenue or any revenue, you can still get approved for cards based on your estimated revenue, as long as your personal credit is strong. And so what I mean by strong is you want to have at least 4 primary personal accounts. You don't want any late payments.
And when you say accounts, you mean credit accounts, like opening consumer credit cards or
correct
furniture store cards or something.
Any retail cards, credit cards, auto loan, mortgage, personal accounts like those, at least 4. More the better. When it comes to utilization, you want to make sure that's at least under 30%, but ideally under 10%. And then when it comes to actually applying for the cards, you want to make sure you have no more than 2 hard inquiries on each of the 3 bureaus. And each bank is going to pull from a different bureau based on your location in the country. So one of the big resources I have is it shows people what banks pull from what bureaus. So part of the credit stacking strategy that I have is to really essentially play Tetris with these hard inquiries on the bureaus, so you can get the most amount of cards in the shortest period of time. But as long as you kind of fit those general requirements and have the business checking account open with that bank, and ideally you have some money in that account, I would recommend to go into the branch to then apply for the business checking account, for the business credit card, at least about a week after you put the money in. And like I said, the more money in the account for sitting, more time, the better. And then always do it in person, because online there's so much credit card fraud that goes on. There's a lot of denials that happen. And then even if you get denied for a card, you don't want to accept that denial. You want to Google Chase reconsideration phone number, and you want to call that phone number, and you want to ask them to reconsider the decision. Let them know hey, I just got denied for this card. I really want to build a relationship with Chase. Can you guys please reconsider the decision? That works very well. And even if it doesn't work the first time, politely end the call back again, talk to a different rep, do that multiple times. We've seen this work many times, where if it doesn't work on the first call, it could work like the 4th, 5th, or 6th call.
Yeah. And I mean, I haven't played this game nearly the depth you have, but I have done, for me personally, when I used to have to fund things bootstrappy, I would do card stacking. And I remember Googling what credit bureau does Bank of America report to? What credit bureau does Zions Bank report to? And as you're applying for credit, you're trying to balance out, who's going to get the polls on the credit reports. And, first of all, the thing I want to say is I did my own research, and this is all totally legal. A lot of people think that sounds like some kind of fraud or brinksmanship. It's just intelligently using the financial system.
100%. And I think like when you're trying to really maximize your benefits, you really want to know what to apply for, when to apply for, and how to apply for. So I kind of went over how to apply for, but when to apply for is very important. So it really depends on how many personal accounts, personal credit card accounts you have opened in the last 6 months. You don't want to have over 2 open in the last 6 months. So generally when I do these credit stacks every quarter, I'm only doing 1 to 2 personal cards every quarter because one, it allows me to then apply for more cards sooner because the business accounts don't report to their personal credit. So when you go to other banks, they can't see you just open up that business account. And so when I get a $20,000 limit at Chase, when I go to Amex can't see what Chase just gave me because that business credit card doesn't report to the personal credit. They only can see the personal credit, which is incredible. And so even after we get approved for, like 8 cards in one day, we then are able to remove some of the inquiries from those open business cards, which is incredible. And that allows us to go for another credit stack in about 2-3 months.
Yeah. And so I know that those of you listening on podcasts won't be able to see this, but I'll describe it to you and you can take my word for it. But Jack, hold up those stacks for us. When you're talking about, turn them sideways. So in Jack's right hand, it looks like he has about 3/4 of an inch high pile of cards. In his left hand, he's got about 1.5 inches. So we're talking, I'm eyeballing it, but that's like 2.5 inches of credit cards there. How many cards is that, would you say?
It's probably
like 50 or 100, somewhere in there?
It's probably about 30 realistically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 30 cards, and you said it's what, close to $500,000?
Yeah, 450, just shy of $500,000.
So I can call Jack and be like, dude, Jack, I got this, I'm buying an apartment complex. We're syndicating it, 100 grand in, 12%, easy money. And you got some method where you're like, give me 24 hours and tell me where to wire the money. And you can, liquidate it off a card and you're good to go, right?
Easy. The other day, I wired 30K into a Forex fund. Today, I'm wiring some money, actually tomorrow, into the oil wells. And like, I'm only doing this because I have good credit and was able to leverage it into business credit. Like I never had, this has been the best year for me ever. But before this, like I never had access to a lot of money ever. Like I didn't have much money. This is like the first time I'm really, doing it at this level. And it's really, for me, it's only been possible through these business credit cards. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, 13 months ago, I got my first business credit card. So in 13 months, I went from 0 business cards to getting approved for $450,000 in business credit. So this is really possible for a lot of people. Will they go faster if they have, decent personal credit? Yes. If they have a business, will they go faster? Yes. But is it possible for most people? Absolutely.
So let's go back to Joe Average then, right? Most people.
Yeah.
So for Joe Average to do this the optimal way, not like the fast, let me cut corners in a hurry way, but like the optimal way, how long should he give himself? And I say Joe Average, it can be Janet Average, it's a he, she, it's not a gender bias thing. Like 2 years? A year? What do you think?
Between 1 and 2 years is very fair. It really depends on what history he already has with the top banks. Like how long has he been banking there? It will determine on how many personal cards he has already, with what limits. Even if he has low limits, there's things he can do that we can increase his limits. And it's all about comparable credit. So if you have high limits, it's easier to get other high limits. And even if you have lower limits, but you're using the cards, there's ways to get all of those limits increased, which is going to help you get more cards in the future. It also depends on what, kind of revenue he has in the business, what type of business, how his business is set up. Some businesses are much easier to get funding for, like consulting companies, for example, e-commerce stores, for example. Even if you had a wholesaling real estate business, instead of having the category as real estate for the entity setup, you want to have like marketing agency, because banks don't want to lend money to a real estate company. They want to lend to a marketing agency, right? And if you're a wholesale company, you're getting leads for, real estate deals. So it's all about, all these different things come together.
Yeah.
And even if you have a new business, you can get a lot of funding for a brand new business. One of the big factors is your history, right? So how long have you had your personal credit cards open for, more age, the better. How long have you been banking at Chase, at Bank of America, things like that. One thing that took me a long time to realize was you never want to close credit card accounts.
Yeah.
The longer you have them open, the better. I didn't know that until literally 2 years ago. It was honestly pathetic thinking about that, but I would get these cards, get the massive sign-up bonus. And then after I got the sign-up bonus, I would close them, then get more. So I had very short history at first. And then I realized okay, you shouldn't actually close them. You should keep them open. So, and even if you have a card that you have an annual fee on and you don't want to pay it, just ask them to downgrade you to the option where you don't have to pay. So you still keep that credit account open. Now you're just not paying for it.
So you can open up a card that's like a premium card that has an annual fee, but usually they waive it the first year and you get all the bonus perks. And then you're saying you can use the card, and then before 12 months comes up, just downgrade it from the premium card to the basic card, and you keep the credit line. You still got to keep all the perks. And it's so interesting. I think that what I've learned, I've been an entrepreneur for 26 years now, and I've learned this is banks and insurance companies, they're in the people business, but they're in the people data business. And your job as a customer or a negotiator, if you think, and I think that's a good way to think of it, as a negotiator with these entities, is to manage, and to the degree you're comfortable with the term, manipulate your data profile so that you fit their models. They don't care. They don't have feelings. They have data, and they have data-driven guidance. And they're saying, okay, how many accounts is this person? How long is their average account? What's their credit score? What's their average, average daily balance month over month? And what, in your job, your job, it's a skill. Like, they should teach this in school. They should be teaching 8-year-olds how to start thinking about how to live their life in such a way that it throws off the data set that's going to make them attractive to lenders in 10, 20, 30 years. But obviously they don't teach that stuff. But that, and it sounds like what you've done is, let's say the average person on a scale of 1 to 10 cares about this stuff at a 2. You decided, hey, for a couple of years, I'm going to care about this at an 8. And I'm just going to live intelligently with this in mind. And now, almost like a magical power, you just have $500,000 you can utilize of other people's money, mostly just because you cared enough to learn and followed some basic rules.
100%. If you want to learn something, you have to put yourself out there. And definitely a big needle mover for me and what I was doing. Well, one, I was giving, once I started learning about it, I started giving people a lot of recommendations. And then once I had more data points to figure out what was working, what wasn't working, I was able to really accelerate with my knowledge base. And then I really found out that a big needle mover in getting approved for top cards with very high limits was to apply for these cards through these high-level relationship managers at these top banks.
Yeah.
So I was, it's hard to get in contact with these individuals, but I knew they were out there, and I worked my way up the ladder with my banking relationships to get to these individuals. And then they were the ones that helped me out with my business credit cards. And then now I am able to get information inside information from these high-level bankers about the internal bank rules that they're looking for out of people. And then I relay that, to my students that I work with on how to make them this perfect, avatar that the banks are trying to work with. And then I connect them, and then the relationship manager helps my students get these top cards. So, I'm helping the banks by giving them ideal people to lend to, and I'm helping my students prime themselves
right
to be lended to. So it's really a win-win.
Yeah, that's so cool. And just what you mentioned about not applying online. If people listen to this whole episode and all they get from that is, hey, from now on, when I apply for credit, I'm not going to go through the online application portals. There's at least one person that's going to hear that, and their whole life is going to change just from that one takeaway. I can personally say, as somebody who has pretty good borrower strength, I've gotten denied for silly, little business. I applied for a business line of credit at Wells Fargo a year ago. I think I asked for $50,000, and they denied me. And I'm sitting here well, that's stupid. Screw Wells Fargo. I'll just call, I bank at Chase. I'll just call them. But what I didn't realize, and you just shed light on, is I might have been denied out of the gate because of my IP address.
Yes.
Or
yeah.
something, or they're like, well, he's on a hotspot and that has a higher risk profile. So we just don't approve applications that are running off of Verizon hotspots or something.
100%, Jeff. Nailed it on the head. And it's in that scenario, a lot of times you just have to call reconsideration. But, to avoid that, you just go in person. They want to make sure they're dealing with the person that's actually, putting their name in on the application.
Man, that's okay. That's so cool. All right, I'm sold. Tell us where to go. How do we learn more about your method and get to know you better and not just access your method, but also you and your knowledge?
Yeah, 100%. So my Instagram is King of Debt on Instagram. I post tons of free content. I got awesome Instagram highlights. I got podcasts post on there. You're going to be on there too, Jeff, here soon.
Sweet.
And I also have a free course. It's 10 videos. It's super, super impactful. I put a lot of effort into this mini course. So, hopefully, Jeff, you can put it in the show notes. And then if anyone wants to shoot me a DM that, wants to, say what up, just say free course or just shoot me a DM, say what up. But yeah, give me a follow. I post tons of free content and I would be happy to give you free insight on your credit journey.
If you loved that episode, then you're definitely going to love this one. Check it out.
Has anything in your life worked well if you're not committed, right? Relationships, do they work if you're not committed? If you're texting or DMing or talking to other people, it never works.